Shabbat Shalom. How do we measure happiness? That is to say, if we were going to look collectively, not just our own individual happiness, because I'm sure the Woods family right now is feeling a certain level of happiness that's even higher than the rest of ours, but generically, as part of the Jewish world, historically, let's even limit it to biblically, happiest days. What are the happiest days in the Torah? Every day. Well, that isn't what the word happiest means. Superlatives do mean that there is a singular one, which is why we can use, or must use, the definite article, the. Yes, I did used to teach English. So the happiness means there is one. All days should be potential for finding happiness, but I will point out we also have days of obligatory mourning. And we're not meant to make those happy in the conventional usage of the word. So I will put the question to you again. Happiest day. Receiving the Torah at Sinai, which is commemorated by the holiday of Shavuot, right? Commemorated by the holiday of Shavuot. Incredibly powerful moment, also a lot of obligation, but clearly it is in the running for happiest day. Other contenders? The day when they crossed the sea. It's not exactly far from our minds, since David Fruchter just chanted Shirat Hayam, the Song of the Sea, just a few minutes ago. Well, maybe more than a few. Indeed, that is considered to be an incredibly ecstatic and happy day, commemorated by the holiday of Passover, exactly. And you're not even supposed to be working right now, but he's still chiming in. Pesach. I thought he was taking a break. Pesach, Passover. Now, there's a little bit of a conundrum about that, however, because you see there's some differentiation in the language of the Torah and the language of our celebration between Pesach and Shavuot, and for that matter, Sukkot, which is our other big contender for joyous day. You see, both Sukkot and Shavuot have something that Pesach doesn't. Hallel, full Hallel. Okay, let me explain this to you for a little bit, especially for those of you that are not familiar with the intricacies of Jewish liturgy. There is a collection of psalms known as Hallel, and these psalms are chanted, really sung, on the days that are the highest peaks of celebration. So, for example, on Shavuot, the day commemorating the giving of the Torah, we chant Hallel. On Sukkot, we chant Hallel. On Pesach, well, on the first day, and at the very end, which are significant holidays, we do all of Hallel. Sorry, not at the end, but the first day, yes, we do Hallel. But for the rest of Pesach, unlike Sukkot, we do an abbreviated Hallel. We shortened it. Certain parts of the Psalms are cut out. Now, is it because we were too busy? We needed to save an extra minute and a half off of our service time by cutting out a little piece? Is it that Pesach would be less joyous than Shavuot? Less joyous than Sukkot, the harvest festival? I mean, maybe gastronomically we might say that, but really? So our sages, who were the ones who came up with the changes to the liturgy, they try to explain why it is that we have this abridgment within the Hallel recitation on Pesach. And Joseph Caro, who you may know was the rabbi that wrote Shulchan Aruch, which is considered to be the last more universal Jewish law code written 500 years ago, so this is not some modern voice, said the reason why we have an abridged Hallel on Pesach, apart from that first day of celebration, is because the Egyptians died. It's because the Egyptians died. Now, this is not a whingy lefty. This is Joseph Caro. You don't get a more traditional voice than this. And yet it sounds like something that many people would poo-poo in a modern conversation and say, what are we caring about the Egyptians for? Right? They enslaved us. They oppressed us. They tried to murder us. And when they came chasing after us as we left the nation, they were more than content to slaughter us there in the desert. We have to reduce our celebration because of that? And the short answer is yes, that absolutely we do. Because in the book of Proverbs, what does it say? Binfol oivecha al tismach. At the fall of your enemy, do not rejoice. But that is not the moment of rejoicing. But we got a little bit of a mixed message here, don't we? Because, let's face it, Pesach is a happy holiday, and we do have a lot of fun, we do rejoice, it is a great experience. But now we're being told not to rejoice over the fall of our enemies. How do we untangle this? Well, the simple thread to pull on is there is a difference between rejoicing over the fall of an enemy and rejoicing over our liberation from oppression. That were we able to find a way to be liberated from Egypt with no one getting hurt, we would rejoice just as much now, if not more. Unfortunately, the Egyptians did make that impossible, and while it is on their shoulders that it worked out the way that it did, we must recognize that it is not our place to rejoice at their devastation. It is only still our place to rejoice at our liberation. We see the distinction between this? If somebody was to be freed from prison, we might not be surprised if they wanted to come back and demolish the prison, having been freed from it. But really, that's not celebration. That's revenge. That is not truly appreciating the proper side of what has occurred. What has occurred is liberation, and that should be celebrated. Now, no more official of source than this, than the ancient Midrashim found in the Talmud, put into the words of God. You see, the way that the text is composed, there is an odd sentence, odd grammar. I'm not going to bore you with the details, but essentially it makes it sound like the angels aren't talking to each other, according to the rabbinic interpretation. Like the angels have fallen silent during this period of the crossing of the sea. And of course, since there is a little bit of an oddity there, the rabbis have to step in to explain. And they say, well, it happened that as the sea was beginning to collapse, as the Egyptians were beginning to be pulled under, the angels were singing. Whether they were singing specifically about the destruction of the Egyptians or whether they were singing just in the normal course of events, as angels constantly sing in praise of God, is debated, but God spoke to them and said, my creations are drowning, and you sing? From God's point of view, yes, he wanted the liberation of the Israelites. He wanted an end to slavery, something that continues to be a driving force behind all godly behavior in the modern world. But that does not mean that God wants the death or destruction of the wicked. When it is the only way in order to achieve liberation and redemption, then it is a necessary component, but it is not a desired component. And so, as the Egyptians drowned, God chastises the angels. The Israelites, they can sing. They've just been liberated, and they're not singing about how glad they are that others have died, only that those that were pursuing them are now no longer pursuing them because of the miracle of the sea, and thus they are truly free at that point. But you, angels, you were not slaves in Egypt. You do not have the right to rejoice while my creation, says God, are drowning. It's hard to navigate these emotions. It is always tempting to simply pick one direction or another, to rend our clothes at the loss of life in any circumstance, and to say it is terrible, it is a shanda, this is something that should be never happen again. It is also tempting to go the opposite direction and say, look, it's for a good cause, and it's all their fault, so who am I to reduce my joy because of their unfortunate demise in this process? Judaism tells us we have to take the more difficult route. We have to have room for our joy. We have to celebrate. How could we not celebrate being liberated from Egypt? But we also have to temper that celebration by recognizing the price that it was bought for, the death of so many Egyptians. And so we abridge our Hallel. It is slightly reduced because it is not quite as joyous as it could have been had it not come with such a heavy price. Now, for those of you that are less familiar with Hallel, you may recognize the same tradition as echoed in our service at home in the Seder. When we recite the list of the plagues, the custom is to spill drops, to take a little from our cup. There are many different traditions of how that is done, but the core idea is found back in our texts hundreds and hundreds of years. And the explanation is exactly the same as why we do not recite the full Hallel. Our cup has been reduced. Our joy has been blunted because of the price that was paid. Now, the cup is still mostly full because, after all, slavery was ended. But we cannot act as though it is perfectly full because of the cost of that freedom. This is not an easy place to be. It makes people very, very uncomfortable, especially in the modern world where many people feel the need to surround themselves by that playlist that will only echo one aspect or the other. The idea that there can be conflicting emotions within one event, that there can be a 90% celebration and a 10% regret, seems to be heresy in the modern world. It must be one or the other, or else you are betraying the soul of your people or betraying your moral compass. It is not that easy, and those who traffic in black and white statements like that should be feared. Well, maybe not feared. Instead, engaged, but engaged in good faith. Expand their playlist to recognize the world doesn't work in that. God doesn't work like that. And this is not the words of some modern idea. This is the words that have sustained us for more than 2,000 years, allowing us to navigate tragedy and joys again and again, while keeping our humanity and while keeping us close to what God wishes for us. Remember, we didn't walk through that sea to then go walk wherever we felt. We walked through that sea so that we could bring Torah to the world. And this is Torah. Shabbat Shalom.